going on? Here looks weird here. Anyways, what's going on, everybody? My name is Ceremonial Witch or Coeur LeBlanc. Doesn't really matter. Choose. You can choose. Coeur LeBlanc is my given name. Ceremonial Witch is a short version of calling me the guy who does ceremonial witchcraft podcast and YouTube videos. Oh, eyes are kind of green today. Anyways, I am so happy that Jordan B. Peterson is making videos again. I couldn't be any more happy about that, to be honest. So I'm going to talk and discuss and spiritualize and philosophize. Philosophize, I guess, is sufficient. Some of his concepts. And I'm actually going to break down his Christianity videos, which I've done many times. And I am someone who thinks the Bible is and can be useful, but at the same time thinks the Bible was used to opiate to the masses, I guess, but like a spiritual opiate. I mean, if you don't have a spirituality, but you need to know that there is a higher power, and you can't come up with it yourself. Christianity, or Islam, or Judaism, wherever you are in the world, wherever what most might be more popular, is there for you. And there's many others that come from one of those sectors, sections, branches, whatever. But I truly believe spirituality has to come from you, the individual. You as a person should come up with your own spirituality. And that could be adopting another spirituality. That could be following Norse, European, Germanic tradition. It could be an African, whether that's African American hoodoo or an Egyptian, either Christianity or older Egyptian tradition. It could be Persian, like Mithra. Can't remember the name of that one now. You could be doing the Greek or the Roman polytheistic. More like a witchcraft, I guess. Following deities, doesn't matter. You can pick, or you could take from all of these and realize they all have something to tell you. Because at the very base of most of these traditions is before they were, and I'm not saying that any pagan witchcraft, shamanistic, Norse, magical system was used to harm anybody, or used to tell people what to believe, or force people to do things. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying there are some major religions that may have done that, but before these major religions have done that, or were used to do that, they were divinely inspired, from Buddha to Jesus, from Odin to Saturn, or I guess Jupiter, to Frigg, to I don't know, Venus, Moon, whatever, Isis, whatever, Mary, if you want to think of Mary as blue like the moon and the mother, or pray to Mary for certain plant things, like she's a fucking plant goddess. She is in May, which is, Taurus, which is towards Venus. Mary is the month of May, May Day, dance around God's penis. God's penis got Mary pregnant, made Jesus, it doesn't matter. Whatever, you can pull from spirituality what you fucking need from spirituality. And more than ever, I don't necessarily use the Bible, but if someone talks about the Bible and pulls inspiration from the Bible to teach something or to whatever the case is, I don't turn it off because Bible's all bullshit. I don't know if I have the clip or not. I was recording a lot of Peterson, and then I realized I've recorded like 4 hours of content on my phone, and I wouldn't even have enough space to make videos. So I had to delete a bunch. So I don't know if I deleted the clip of it. But Peterson made a statement saying, you know, it's not beneficial to think you're neutral if you can't pick a side. And the first thing that came to mind was what Thunder fucking Wizard says. Like, God damn it, Peterson's on his side. No, I mean, there's no side taking, but, you know, technically it's kind of what I think Thunder Wizard was saying about a bunch of people who can't pick if the Bible is something good or not. They just stand in the middle. But in the same sense, what Peterson does with the Bible, he'll say that, you know, in one breath he says that it's metaphorical and to not be taken literally, talking about the myth. Says the story of Moses is a myth, but then he'll say at a certain point, this is where history starts. So, you know, you can take that either way. But when I watch Peterson on stage, I don't care what he's talking about. And this is why certain people, it's irrelevant what they're talking about. If they, I don't know, anybody out here watching me, if I ever watched Cryon, or let's say, what's her name? Is it Esther? No. Abraham Hicks. Kind of what, Jesus. Not Dolores Cannon, but the other one I talk about, the dude, slept on a book, knew everything in the book. He was the medium versus Dolores Cannon put someone into trance and got information from them. So this person would do the opposite of that. Fucking, what's his name? Love the guy too. Learned so much from him. It'll come to me later. These people were channeling information. Well, what I get from Peterson is because he, you know, someone who talks about the Bible and uses the Bible to preach the word of God is so different than someone like Peterson who studied and learned the Mesopotamian deities, who learned the Egyptian deities and religions, who learned some Norse traditions. He's got all that information in him, and he's going through the Bible and putting all that into there and drawing on all these different spiritualities to make his point. And this is why it's very informative and well done, and why you can listen to it and realize that it doesn't matter if you believe in Christianity or not, you can get something from this. I mean, the first two, every one of his biblical series are great, but his first two are by far my favorite because of the fact that he uses the Bible. It's like Birch talked a lot, has this episode where he talks about some teachers can do, because, you know, he says those who can't do teach, or those who can't whatever criticize. Well, he talks about when he met he has his mother who passed away, his birth mother, but his witch mom, the one he calls Ma, I forget her name, but anyways, one who taught him witchcraft. He goes back to the old town at one time because he had this dream and he needed money and whatever the case was. He goes back and he speaks with her, and she pulls out the cards and starts fucking doing the cards, and she's just kind of looking at him and staring through his soul, and she's turning over the cards like she's doing a tarot reading, but not even drawing off the cards, just speaking to him. And if you've ever been in the presence of a good astrologer, tarot reader, rune reader, whatever the case is, you'll notice that the cards, and even if they use the cards to draw off of, because that can happen, but what you notice is when they're a good medium and channeler, the card will come up, and then that will be the thought they have to expand on. But it's what comes through their head that the person needs to hear at that time. And if they're really good at it, whether they're polarized or depolarized or not, And this is where I think Thunder Wizard's bang on when he said you can do rune readings and tarot readings for people, whether there's money involved or whatever the case is, accurately, because you're devoid of, you don't care if you hurt their feelings or not. Now, if you're getting paid, you might not want to say bad things in case you want them to give you a good review and all that. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter if you're polarized or not. And depending on what programming you have in there, that's how you're going to relate the messages that come through you. It's going to come through your programming. But you're able to do an accurate reading because you're getting paid to do this reading for someone else. You don't have, if I wanted to say, find out if something happened, if one of my kids are messing around with drugs or whatever, well, I'm going to have the anticipation and I want to see that. No, it's not going to happen. So even if I was to get the devil card, the Mars card, the burning building, the tower, if I get I don't know, it doesn't matter, the cup guy where there's a couple cards where there's a lot of cups everywhere, someone's drinking, whatever, partying and all that comes up, I'm going to probably try to flip that message and to mean something other than what it probably should say to me. That's kind of what I think Thunder Wizard gets at, and I think he's bang on with that. And that's important to know. So when Peterson gets out there, he's not necessarily trying to prove the Bible real or not. But even if he was, let's say his intention deep down inside was to get people to believe in the Bible again, because he kind of says he wants people to use the Bible in an active a way, because reading the Bible and getting a priest to explain the Bible to you is not going to be beneficial to anybody else. But someone, a third party like Peterson, who comes out there and tells you what they think the Bible means, the psychological significance, draws on older, ancient ideas, and then compares it and metaphorically connects it to different things, psychological, to brain, to the human experience, all these different things. It's profound. And more than that, I think Peterson, it doesn't matter. He can go out there and say he's going to talk about spaghetti and meatballs and how to prepare spaghetti and meatballs and whatever the case is. And he's going to end up telling you how you should teach your kids how to cook the proper way and why it's important to domesticate your kid by 4. If not, there's going to be some serious ramifications. He's going to teach you how, cleaning up the house first is a good act. Like I think I might have recorded a clip as well of why cleaning your room is so important. And I know it's like a meme now, but it's so fucking important. And you can say, well, Peterson's telling us to clean our room, how's that going to help us? Well, I bought a program from Frederick Xavier on how to manifest money, and one of the things he talks about is about keeping your house clean, keep moving up all the clutter. Same fucking thing Peterson says. So before you dismiss it, understand that a paid program that I paid for, one of the teachers I highly respect, says the same fucking thing. So that's important to fucking know as well. The overall point I was trying to stress just then and there was Peterson is a medium. He is channeling information from somewhere else. I don't know which one. It might be before Adam and Eve. It might be the one that talks about Cain and Abel. I don't know. But there's one where he got a letter from somebody. He reads a letter, and this person either saw it in a dream or whatever the case was, or it was somebody using a spiritual drug. Make of that what you want, but a hallucinogen, and ask the spirits why Peterson's important. And I played this before because I believe it. And it says he's important because he's expressing the divine masculine. He's getting men to connect to their divine masculine. Be able to, sorry, my hands are dirty, I was working at home. Fucking forehead is too. To be able to express the divine masculine, connect to it, to not be so, anyways, doesn't matter. And I believe that. I believe he's channeling something extraordinary, and the information comes through him. And the Bible is just the tool, just like the tarot cards, just like your birth chart when an astrologer tells you about your life, just like any psychic medium that you trust, that you think is good. They have the segue, and the Bible is his astrology chart. It's his tarot cards. He's using the stories to explain how you have, and I think you can do that. I think that's very possible. I have come to the realization that the Bible is more a guide to how to live, how to be a man, how to be a woman, probably more of a man, but how to, and what not to do and what to do and why to do things from ancient people. And I'm all for the idea that the Bible stories were stolen from previous stories, from previous generations of pagan or Norse or any other mythology. I'm all for that, because that happens, and he explains a good way to do that, whether you think it's accurate or not. He talks about how two tribes got together, and the two tribes get together and they can decide to fight, and the stronger tribe wins, but the tribe you're trying to conquer is going to lose half their people, and you're going to lose half the people, so you're going to end up being the same size tribe. Whereas instead of doing that, you can have a celestial battle of the gods in the cosmos, which ends up turning out to being just a conversation back and forth between you and this new tribe, explaining why your god's better than their god. And he says that, they probably come to the conclusion that, okay, well, your god does all these things, and it works because you guys are still alive. Our God does all these things, and it works, and our God's still, and because our tribe's still alive. So out of God A and God B, we merge them together, and we get God C. And I think this is part of this Roman mythology of the planets. I think that's why this is important, because I think that's happened. And he draws on the Mesopotamians at this point, where Marduk, he's a god that has eyes all around his head. The gods elect him to take out Tiamat, which is where the asteroid belt was, which was a watery planet. Now, depending on where you look, some of the stories say she was the sun's wife, and then the sun was bounded to where it was supposed to stay there, and Mercury had to stay beside it, like its little fucking moon around the sun. But in that story, it's in what Peterson talks about, it's salt water and a freshwater monsters that were male and female that got together, and Marduk, or whatever that god's name is, that took it out, was able to speak magical words, which was to stop all the demons that Tiamat shot at it, because he took out Tiamat's husband at first. And the Mesopotamian story I read initially said that it was a planet thing. So Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars, they were all wanting to get rid of their mom, Tiamat, because Tiamat heard that they wanted to kill their dad. Once again, this is why I think it's important what Peterson said. It's like, okay, well, these gods against these gods. So it's one tribe's gods against another tribe's gods. And Mesopotamia was made out of what happened after the god they created and got elected by all their gods combined. They created this new god, took out the problem, and they built the world out of the fucking pieces after, and that was Mesopotamia. It was the two tribes that came together and made this tribe, this country, this whatever it was. And I think that's useful information. And these things echo in all the stories of the Bible. And this is why I played the Gnostic story that I heard of, because I saw the same thing that he talks about, how Tiamat, the root word for Tiamat is, I forget, it's another T-A, some other word. And that word is important because at the beginning of Genesis, whenever the god is looking in the water, it's a reference to that. And the Gnostic story was that there's these 36 archons, and the last one was Sophia, and she created this god, and that god became the god of the Bible, which, say what you want about it. I thought it was I didn't care if that's true or not true. I think it's I like history, I like learning about past things, gods and all that. The point I'm trying to get at is, when Peterson's on stage teaching this shit, he's using all his knowledge and then all the thoughts that come to him, because he says point blank out, and I think I recorded it as well, that he does these things because it helps him think. You work things out when you talk, when you write, when you record video, whatever the case. It's kind of like I'm doing, and you put things together. You can have all the thoughts in your head all day long. If you don't start saying them out loud or writing, you're not going to put things together. It gives you a chance to, conscious mind's busy doing something, talking, and as you say the one point that you got from the thoughts, the ideas, whatever, that's the conscious from Mercury or Odin or whatever, or it's because your conscious is busy, the subconscious can give you these ideas and these memories. It doesn't matter, and then your conscious puts them together as you get it from the subconscious, and it's beautiful, and it works fucking fantastic. And that's what Peterson's doing on stage, and I want everybody to understand that whether you like the Bible or not, you can learn from this. And it's even more so helps you stay grounded. Like I said about Thunder Wizard. Thunder Wizard helps me stay grounded. Well, so does Peterson. So that's my thoughts specifically on Peterson being a channel, being somebody who's getting wisdom from whatever you think thoughts are, whether you're like me and you think there's spirits that are around us, because we don't understand the mind, we don't understand the brain. Everybody out here talking about the conscious and unconscious, whether it's Thunder Wizard, Frederick Xavier, anybody, we have a general enough basic knowledge of these things to be able to do what we need to do metaphysically, whatever, to do our magic. But no one actually understands this shit. Because the brain surgeons, you know, the fucking, and the neurologist, anyways, the people that study the fucking brain, the scientists, will tell you that even when it comes to DNA, there's guys on record saying our DNA is such a mystery. It's been around for so long. It makes no sense. And, you know, it's alien-like. And not necessarily like extra from up there, probably from inner Earth, but I already did an episode on that, so I won't get down there. The point is, we pretend like we know these things, and it's because we have to have confidence when we teach them, so people take on our ideas so they can fix their lives. So if I came out here and told you, well, I don't really know, but this is how it works for me, you know, whatever. Some people might like it, some people might not. But we really are barely scratching at the surface, because if the scientists are barely scratching at the surface, I mean, as an example, how the fuck would I say that? Anyways, I won't even get into it, but there's so much to all this. But anyways, besides that, the point I'm trying to get at is Peterson is channeling information, and he's using the Bible as like the tarot cards. There's a reason to be on that stage talking about it. So to just not watch it because you have an aversion to the Bible is drastically wrong. Because like I said, I get more and more the impression that you can use the Bible. And he says it too, like he knows the Bible was used to force people, slave people, get rid of shit. But at the same time, the story was just talking about between the two tribes, taking God A and God B and making God C. That is what Christianity ended up doing. So they realized that, you know, instead of sacrificing half their people, half the other people, and only having, you know, because, I mean, they did do that. They went around burning people, killing people that didn't conform. But then eventually they decided, okay, well, we can't just keep doing this. We're preaching love and, you know, all this shit. Yet we're going around killing people. So they took on their deities, changed the names. And this is why, like, if I do Saturn, I'm doing Satan. I'm writing Satan on there too, because some people think Saturn's Satan. I'm writing Antshar, which is the Mesopotamian name. I'm going to write Kronos. I might put Odin as Saturn. I'm going to put every fucking no name that I know that's been used for Saturn on that bitch. I might even write the Grim Reaper, for God's sakes. And that's why. There's more power in all these names. But that's what ended up happening. And he's trying to teach that. He's trying to use the Bible as a way, because if you're an atheist, let's say, see, I don't believe in the God of the Bible, but I believe that there's a higher power and there's a God. And I believe that there's 7 planets that we can use their energies, whether that's energy centers in our body, or if you don't think the chakras are energy centers, well, we have, and I also have Peterson saying, well, is the cosmos out there or is the cosmos in here? And he thinks it's both. If you don't think Peterson talks about magic, you haven't listened to the man. And I'll play probably 1 or 2 little minute clips where he directly talks about speaking things into existence, using your conscious mind and your subconscious mind to use through DreamWorks, and using your conscious mind to bring things into your reality that we don't understand it, but it is happening regardless if you understand it or not. And that's magic. You can learn magic from this. So, without further ado, I think I'm just going to get into I'll just get into the first.
It's a good question. Now, the postmodern answer was we can't. And that's not a good answer, because you drown in chaos under those circumstances, right? You can't make sense of anything. And that's not good, because it's not neutral to not make sense of things. It's very anxiety-provoking. It's very depressing because if things are so chaotic that you can't get a handle on them, your body defaults into emergency preparation mode and your heart rate goes up and your immune system stops working and like you burn yourself out, you age rapidly because you're surrounded by nothing you can control. It's that's an existential crisis, right? It's anxiety provoking and depressing, very hard on people. And even more than that, it turns out that the way that we're constructed neurophysiologically is that we don't experience any positive emotion unless we have an aim and we can see ourselves progressing towards that aim. It isn't precisely attaining the aim that makes us happy. As you all know, if you've ever attained anything, because as soon as you attain it, then the whole little game ends. Then you have to come up with another game, right? So it's Sisyphus, and that's okay. But it does show that the attainment can't be the thing that drives you because it collapses the game.
All right. So what you just heard was huge. So he hit on the when you go into emergency mode. I don't know if he said it here or not, but I think he said one of these things. He talks about the same thing about your immune system stop working. This is the fight or flight we talk about in spirituality a lot. This is the whole reason why I say it's fear-based media, going into fight or flight is so dangerous for COVID and all that shit, because if you're doing that, you're shutting off your immune system and you can't fight against COVID. And then after that, he gets into, Frater says, if you cast for money, you get the money, and then what? You'll be happy for a day, and you pay shit off, money's gone, then what do? So you don't cast for the end, you cast for the means to continue making the money. So you cast for something that's going to keep making the money. So this is why Thunder Wizard talks about your passion and your purpose so much as well, because if you find your passion and purpose, then you can find a way to make that profitable, so you're doing something you love, and you're making money at the same time to survive, and it's not about the money at this point. And that's what Peterson is saying. So he goes into great detail a lot about this, and it's the fact that one second, sorry. But the reason why that's so important is because when you're going to achieve something, so you're doing a magical operation, whatever the case is, you might be excited about it, you might not be excited about it, I don't know. But when I started my initiation phase, I was so excited about starting magic and doing everything needed to be done in my initiation to get to the next levels and start magic. And I couldn't stop. Time stopped when I was doing that. And it's the one way the body tells you that you're doing something worthwhile. That's one way to figure out kind of what your purpose is, in a manner of speaking. But not only that, like you're working at a job, you think you're up for promotion, and then you find out you got the promotion. Well, endorphins are released, if you are working out and you're trying to lose weight and you start seeing yourself looking better in the mirror, and then you finally go weigh yourself and you lost that weight, well then you stay on track and it's an upward spiral, and your body it's a system. This is magic. It's just a different way of looking at it that's more practical, and this is what I meant by the whole thing that keeps me grounded, because he talks about it in a practical way. He's teaching magic to people. Just people don't understand it, that's all. Or maybe they don't understand it, but they just don't think it's magic. But he's using the Bible. That's basically a grimoire. The Bible is using a book, it's basically a grimoire. It's filled with esoteric knowledge. Greater Xavier has an Old Testament fucking program on how to use the Old Testament to do magic. Like, it's incredible. So, he's teaching magic, whether you want to believe it or not. Anyways, I'm going to let him keep talking and proving what I just said.
I know you stated in the last lecture that the importance for setting aims in life, and to kind of have goals to work towards, right? So my question was, how do you do that if you don't know where you want to go? Because that's kind of where I got stuck on your future authoring program, because...
Okay, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think it's echoed to some degree in the structure of the biblical stories, and in this manner. So there's this notion in the Old Testament that morality is following a sequence of prohibitions. There's a bunch of bad things you shouldn't do, and then basically you're good enough. And I think there's wisdom in that. I think that's kind of where children start, right? I mean, I love children and all that, but they're crazy little creatures, and they need to be, civilized. partly what you do is you lay prohibitions on them, and mostly what you're trying to do is lay prohibitions on them for the behaviors that, if they manifested, would make their life miserable. So I have another chapter in this book that I'm writing called "Don't Let Your Children Do Anything That Makes You Dislike Them." And the idea there is that your job as a parent is to help your children become the sort of 4-year-olds that adults genuinely smile at when they come into a room, because that makes the entire social environment both truthful and welcoming. And so your job is to make them desirable social beings, and a lot of that is prohibition. Okay, and there's this ethical transformation. It happens to some degree in the tradition of in the prophetic tradition, where there's a spirit that seemed, in some sense, to rise above the law. But there's a real transformation between the Old Testament and the New Testament, because the Old Testament is prohibition, and the New Testament is, well, here's the good things you do once you're more than merely prohibiting yourself from impulsive sin, let's say. There's a positive good to be accomplished. Well, you might say, well, I don't know what the positive good is. Fair enough, man. So this is why this thing that I've said to people has become this crazy internet meme, but that's to clean up your room, and which is a lot better and more useful than people think. It's a lot harder too, but the first thing you do, I think, and I learned this in part from Solzhenitsyn when he was trying to iron out his soul when he was in the Gulag, because he was trying to figure out how he got there, how he contributed to how he got there. You know, not Stalin and Hitler, even though they were kind of to blame, you know, but there wasn't much he could do about that. I think what you have to do, and this is part of humility, is you have to look around you within your sphere of influence, like the direct sphere of influence, and fix the things that announce themselves as in need of repair. And those are often small things, you know, and they can be like your room. Put it in order, because the thing is, it isn't exactly so important that your room is in order, although it is. What's important is that you learn how to distinguish between chaos and order, and to be able to act in a manner that produces order. And in most households, there's 100 things that could be done to just make it less hideous and horrible. And so practicing that it's a real useful form of meditation, and it's also, I think it's a divine act, because you're taking chaos. And you know, if you pay attention even to a room, it's so interesting. And I learned, because I've renovated many places now and tried to make them beautiful. And one of the things that I've really learned is that even if you own a structure, unless you've investigated all the nooks and crannies and cleaned them up and put your own imprint on them and made them yours, they're not yours. The mere fact of physical ownership doesn't make them yours. You have to establish a dynamic relationship with the objects before they're actually yours. And I think you can do something as simple as just sit on your bed and think, okay, there's probably like 5 things I could do today so that tomorrow morning is slightly better than this morning was, or at least I'm not falling behind. And those will usually be, it's like having to eat a toad in the morning, right? It's like, it's not going to be something you want to do. There'll be things you're trying to avoid. They're snakes, essentially. But if you ask yourself, like you're asking someone, which I think is a form of prayer, if you ask yourself, instead of telling yourself, you know, what is it that I could do to set things more right today, that I would actually do? It's usually some small thing, because you're not that disciplined, you know. Then you can go do it. And then you put the world together a little more when you do that. And that spreads out. But you also construct yourself into something that's better able to call order forth from chaos. And that makes you just incrementally stronger. And then the next day, you can maybe take on a slightly larger task. And like, you get the benefit of compound interest if you do that. It's a tremendously powerful technique. And I think if you do that, at some point, instead of just having to fix things up that are not good, you'll start to get a glimmer of the positive things that you could do, you know, the positive things that you could do that would actually constitute a vision. And that's what I would recommend.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
All right, so that's fucking huge what he just said there. Fucking huge. So, on top of simply trying to find your passion and your purpose, because that guy did the self-authoring program, and he wants to know what his passion and purpose is. Self-authoring program is my basic knowledge of it is you write down if there's, I don't know, 3 or 5 things you want that realistic, you might write them down, and 3 or 5 things that you really don't want to happen. So you have your heaven and your hell, and you start writing down steps to take to your hell. Well, he got stuck on this. He got stuck on the part of because he doesn't know what he wants. So he can't answer the question of what he wants to do in life. And if everything was possible within realistic circumstances, he can't figure out what the fuck he would want. And I think a lot of people have that problem, because I even struggle with that from time to time. So this is huge what he says. So instead of starting off with just trying to brainstorm about all these things that you may or may not want to do, you start doing the things you're supposed to do. So, because like, who are you to try to get something that you want? You know, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a fucking podcast, YouTube fucking star, but you're not doing the dishes, you're not helping your wife at home, you're not raising your fucking kids, you're not keeping your house clean. Yet you want to have the discipline and the fortitude to be able to fucking, you know, influence a bunch of people, yet you don't have control of your own life. That's what I glean from this, and it may be because that's what I need to do. But I think it's highly probable that, you know, that's what he means, and that's when it starts happening. So, for me, example, today I wanted to record. As soon as I woke up, I wanted to record. I wanted to do this right away, but instead I did the dishes. I put up the plastic on my back deck for my dog when she's not in the house to be cooler, or to be hotter because the winter's coming, and it's nice outside today, so it's a good day to do it. So this way, because my back deck is where the west is, so the west wind comes through there. So it also helps my heat, my back. Was that a patio sliding door that goes out to my patio, my back deck? So it's 2 windows basically, and the heater's right kind of beside it. So it's kind of shitty when you're running the heater and the heat's just, you know, there to stop the cold, and it's just keeping the house neutral. So I put that up. I did a bunch of laundry. I swept all the floors in my house. I do that daily. I mean, maybe it's because I'm a witch that I keep all my fucking floors clean all the fucking time. I always got a broom in my hand. I don't know, but that's something I've been doing since before I knew or thought I was even a witch. I've always had a broom in my hand, and maybe it's because I intuitively know, you know, because like you listen to people that talk about hoodoo or Santeria or Palo, and they have hot foot powder, and they say negative spirits like to hang out on the floor, and you know, when you do a cleansing, you got to get all the corners and all the spaces and under the bed and all that, because that's where these negative entities like to stay. They like clutter, they like mess. So there's a lot to what he's saying there that is very magical. Like I already previously said, Frederick Xavier says this in his free channel. He also says it on his paid programs to keep your fucking house clean. And it's true. You know, we were like, oh fuck, we don't get money until Wednesday. We got some money in the bank, but all these bills have to get paid. And then she finds out, oh, well, I'm actually getting paid on Tuesday, so we're getting money a day earlier. And then we find out, oh, we're getting extra money on that day. And then all of a sudden, you know, is it because of all the candles I did? I don't know, maybe. But I also, we're getting an extra check because they realize with all this COVID shit, people being at home, that people with kids should have more money. So we're getting extra money by the end of November or something like that. So, you know. But, so in other words, is this extra money we're getting because every day I don't do my passion, my recording. I don't do any of this shit until after I did my chores. I wake up, I clean my bedroom, where my candles are, if there's any incense or ash on the floor, you know, I clean up all that shit. I wax, I make a fell, whatever the case is. Then I make my fucking bed, and then I bring all my dirty laundry from my room downstairs, and then I do a few loads of laundry. Then I make my wife some food, and then I do the fucking dishes, and then I do the extra things, like we're doing renovations, so I paint the moldings, and I put the moldings up. The molding didn't fit on one side, so I had to cut it, I measured that, I gotta finish that when I get home. I mean, there's certain things I can, you know, as long as I get a certain amount of things done, then I can. And I've come to realize that if I don't do so much of this, and I try to record, the recording turns out all fucked up, or circumstances will get in the way. And also by doing this every day, it's become a repetitive thing that I don't even think about it anymore. So when I'm in the kitchen cooking, I automatically start the dishes. And I'm automatically listening to something to get me inspired. And, you know, all these things just keep And they just keep working out. So yeah, I'm doing candles at night, then I'm also taking actions and keeping my house clean. So there's no negative energies or entities around to be able to fuck up my magic. And, you know, it helps the kids see, okay, well, cleaning is part of life. Because if you want your kids to clean, you're not cleaning up. Well, it's going to be very hard for you to say clean up, because they have never seen you clean up. So they're not going to know how to do it, first of all. And second of all, why would they do it? But anyways, so that's one extremely important aspect of this and why it is magical. I mean, this is probably going to be a long enough fucking video already, so I'm not going to probably put the Freight of Xavier or the birch things on here that I was talking about, but maybe next video I will. I'll segue back to it somehow, right? After I watch this, there's always things that, you know, I forget to mention, so I'll put that in another video and I'll put those on there just so you know. But on top of that, finding your passion. I'm going to play another clip after too that he talks about it. But the whole dopamine thing, when you're doing something and you realize that you lost track of time just fucking, you know, you don't even realize time's passing. And, you know, you're just having a great time. Like, you're so engaged in something. Well, when those things happen, it's because you're doing something that is worth doing. So besides all of that, being in the magical part and finding your passion and purpose that Thunder Wizard talks about, he's teaching you that if you take steps, you'll find that passion and purpose. But you don't even need to do that far. You start taking these simple steps of cleaning up your house and doing things, you know. And, you know, if you're not used to it, the first few days, you might just fall asleep. But here's the thing. I wanted something to talk about. I didn't know what to talk about. I do my chores. I go and do my meditation. And I do my ritual in my head. And then I fucking start drifting off. It's like sleeping while being awake. And before you think that's crazy, Carl Jung used to do it all the time. His red book, that's what that was made of. It's the imagination being as an imagination. Basically, while he's awake, he's sleeping, and it's just a way of, you know, in my opinion, it's DMT release while you're meditating. And I am getting fairly good at doing that. And I think it's why at night when I dream, I'm able to take control of my dream. Because I'm doing this during the day now. During the day when I get in these things, the only control I have is to be able to remind myself, okay, because I realize I'm in this, and I realize, okay, fuck, I'm actually in my bed right now, but right now I'm actually somewhere. Most of the time it's in my town. Like the last one I had, I was trick-or-treating. It was 3 years ago, and we were around this place around my mom's house. But the setting was 3 years ago, but the knowledge I had was present-day knowledge, like the stuff I know now. And when I realized that I was in my bed, there was a person there laying down, and there was a girl there laying down, and older woman, kind of looked like a hippie. And I asked the one guy that I was speaking to, because that's what happened when we went to this guy for trick-or-treating, and it happened exactly like it happened 3 years ago during Halloween. And he said, oh, she's busy right now, she's doing a meditation, and she's a witch. And I'm like, oh yeah? I was gonna say that's funny, but I didn't say anything. And then he's like, yeah, she's it's this old tradition, and it was just weird, but it's like this old tradition where you pretend you grow roots out of your feet and you get rid of all the your negative or negativity or too much, you know, harmful energy out of your body, basically is what he meant. But I think he said negative energy. I'm like, holy fuck. So then when I came out of that, that's the first thing I fucking did, because to me it was my subconscious telling me, Corey, you haven't done this in a while. Pretend, visualize that the roots are growing out of your feet and get rid of, see all this negativity, harmful energy that you've accumulated from people, from the day, from the stresses, and have it come out of your body. And after I did it, I felt great. And then I took on my projects, and now I'm recording. So, and right now I'm at dance, and my daughter and my wife are about to come out, and I'm close to done. And that's because this is something I love fucking doing. It's one of the reasons why I watch Peterson, and I watch Frater, and I watch Birch, and I talk about them all the time, because I want to put in my 10,000 hours and do this. And, you know, can I be on a stage like Peterson and selling out stadiums and, you know, doing what he's doing? I don't know. With COVID, who knows? But I'd love to be able to help people in a positive way find their power, get spiritual, manifest the things they want once I fine-tune it or whatever the case is. So I'm watching guys that do that, and I'm learning how they do it, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, how I can do that myself. And one of the reasons I record is so I can get my thoughts out, so I can teach, so I can do all this shit. It's very beneficial and helpful. But anyway, so my wife and daughter are coming right now, so I'm going to resume this when I get home in the driveway. Thanks for listening. I'll be right back. Listen to some more Peterson, I
Fine.
guess.
That's a real challenge for people, and I think it's a mistake to think that way. Because I think consciousness is far more than we think it is, but it's still something we have to grapple with. I'm a psychoanalytic thinker, and what that means is that I believe that people are collections of subpersonalities and that those subpersonalities are alive. They're not machines. They have their viewpoint, they have their wants, they have their perceptions, they have their arguments, they have their emotions. They're like low-resolution representations of you. You know, when you get angry, it's a very low-resolution representation of you. It only wants rage, or it only wants something to eat, or it only wants water, it only wants sex. It's you, but shrunk and focused in a specific direction. And all those motivational systems are very, very ancient, very archaic, and very, very powerful. And they play a determining role in the manner in which we manifest ourselves. And as Freud pointed out with the id, we have to figure out how to take all those underlying animalistic motivations and emotions and civilize them in some way so that we can all live in the same general territory without tearing each other to shreds, which is maybe the default position of both chimpanzee and humanity. You know, so I take that seriously, the idea that we're a loose collection of spirits, and that you know, it says in the Old Testament somewhere that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and I think this is akin to that. If you know that you're not in control of yourself thoroughly, and that there are other factors behind the scenes, like the Greeks thought that human beings were the playthings of the gods. That's the way they conceptualized the world. And they sort of meant the same thing. They meant that there are these great forces that move us, that we don't create, that we're subordinate to in some sense. Not entirely, but we can be subordinate to them, and they move our destinies. That was the Greek view. And there's something, it teaches you humility to understand that there's a hell of a lot more going on behind the scenes. And you're the driver of a very complex vehicle, but you don't understand the vehicle very well. And it's got its own motivations and methods, and sometimes you think it's doing something and it's doing something completely different. You see that in psychotherapy all the time, because you know, you help someone unwind a pattern of behavior that they've manifested forever. First of all, they describe it, then they become aware of it, then maybe they start to see what the cause is. They had no idea why they were acting like that. You know, they have to have the memory that produced the behavioral pattern to begin with. It has to be brought back to mind, and then it has to be analyzed and assessed, and then they have to think about a different way of acting, and it's extraordinarily complex. So, psychoanalytic, literary. Well, there's this postmodern idea about literature, and about the world, for that matter, that if you take a complex piece of literature like a Shakespeare play, there's no end to the number of interpretations that you can make of it. You know, you can interpret each word, you can interpret each phrase, each sentence, each paragraph, you can interpret the entire play. The way you interpret it depends on how many other books you've read, depends on your orientation in the world. It depends on a very, very large number of things, how cultured you are or how much culture you lack. All of those things. It opens up a huge vista for potential interpretation. And so the postmodernists sort of stubbed their toe on that and thought, well, if there's this vast number of interpretations of any particular literary work, how can you be sure that any interpretation is more valid than any other interpretation? And if you can't be sure, then how do you even know those are great works? How do you know they can't? Maybe they're just works that the people in power have used to facilitate their continual accession of power, which is really a postmodern idea and a very, very cynical one, but it has its point. But the thing is, it's grounded in something real, right? It's like, yes, you can interpret things forever. I want to show you something here, just briefly. We'll go back to it later. Look at this. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So, at the bottom here, every single one of those lines is a biblical verse, okay? Now, the length of the line is proportionate to how many times that verse is referred to in some way by some other verse. So you say, well, this is the first hyperlinked book, right? I'm dead serious about that. You can't click and get the hyperlinks, obviously, but it's a thoroughly hyperlinked book, and it's because, well, Well, the people who worked on these stories that are hypothetically at the end, right, which is the end can't affect the beginning. That's the rule of time, right? What happens now can't affect what happened to you 10 years ago, even though it actually can, but whatever. Well, you reinterpret things, right, and then they're not the same, but whatever, we won't get into that. But technically speaking, the present cannot affect the past, but if we're looking at a piece of literature, that's not right, because when you write the end, you know what was at the beginning, and when you write the beginning, or edit it, you know what's at the end. And so you can weave the whole thing together. And there's 65,000 cross-references, and that's what this map shows. And so that's a great visual representation of the book. And then you can see, well, why is it deep? Why is the book deep? Well, just imagine how many pathways you could take through that, right? I mean, you'd just journey through that forever. You'd never, ever get to the end of it. There's permutations and combinations, and every phrase is dependent on every other phrase, and every verse is dependent on every other, not entirely, but 65,000 is not a bad start. And so, okay, well, so that's another issue in some sense that seems to make the postmodernist critique even more correct. How in the world are you going to extract out a canonical interpretation of something like that? It's like it's not possible. But here's the issue, as far as I can tell. So when the postmodernists extended that critique to the world, they said, look, well, a text is complicated enough. You can't extract out a canonical interpretation. What about the world? The world's way more complicated than a text, and so there's an infinite number of ways that you can look at the world. And so how do we know that any one way is better than any other way? And that's a good question. Now, the postmodern answer was we can't. And that's not a good answer, because you drown in chaos under those circumstances, right? You can't make sense of anything. And that's not good, because it's not neutral to not make sense of things. It's very anxiety-provoking. It's very depressing, because if things are so chaotic that you can't get a handle on them, your body defaults into emergency preparation mode, and your heart rate goes up, and your immune system stops working, and like you burn yourself out, you age rapidly.
All right. So I can only do about 7, 5, sometimes even like 1 minute of this shit at a time, because there's so much to unpack in there. So in that clip I just showed you, we started off with talking about our, let's call them urges, emotional things that happen, but they're more primal. So on some level, sorry, got some, I don't know. Anyways, on some level, when it comes to wanting to make babies and eating food, it's sometimes beyond your control. So I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry, I fucking eat. When it comes to a man, and I'm not saying this to be rude or anything like that, women can have sex more on command than men. That's why masturbation is more prominent among men than maybe women. And this is something I don't want to get into, because I can't really speak on another gender that I'm not. And I don't remember any past lives where I was. So, point is though, when you become angry sometimes because something happens, or you remember something or whatever, sometimes these things happen almost as if, it's out of your control. And I played this part before, or a similar part before, because he's speaking about deities here. Like something like Mars Aryan. I don't know if he actually says Mars in this part or not. I know another part I recorded prior, he actually talked about Mars being, anger. And this is why it's been deified, personified as, maybe it's Aries in the Greek tradition. But the point is, and he talks about the Greeks and how, if you actually look at the things like the Greeks did, you actually become more humbled. And, because the gods are using us as playthings to a certain extent, but the reason why these things are personified is because they live within everybody. Everybody has these urges, okay? So maybe unless you become a monk, you get depolarized, and maybe these urges are, it's not so easy, and that's why becoming a ceremonial magician, part of the training is becoming depolarized, so that these things can't grip you and control you. And becoming depolarized isn't the same as what he says about, it's not okay to be neutral and not find reasons or solutions to either agree or disagree with things. So when I say stuff like, for me, learning about if we went to the moon or not is something I don't care about so much because I can't prove it either way. And I have opinions, and I have thoroughly developed my opinion on that. But once again, whether I go out and I argue with people about, yes, we went to the moon because of this, or no, we went to the moon because of this, or we can't go to the moon because of this, and it's not going to do anybody any fucking good. And there's a lot of information just put out there just because. But this is why you can listen to Jordan Peterson using the Bible. You can learn witchcraft. I mean, right here he's talking about deities, and and how these are primordial. I mean, this helped me out a lot when I learned that, the reason why we have so many deities is because so many different traditions around the world personified these emotions that everybody has. And what is a deity? What is anger? Well, it's Mars energy. It's a god. And why is it a god? Well, it's because it lives in everybody. It never dies. You can die and come back. And let's say we can prove reincarnation for some reason, which we can't. But if you die and come back, you're always going to experience anger unless you get some kind of control. But even then, you're still going to be polarized in some area of your life. You can't be completely depolarized and get rid of anger completely. So this is why it's a god, because it's within all of us. It's within everybody. It never dies. And it's powerful, especially when it comes to anger. That's why it feels good to get angry. I don't know if I have it on this one or not, but he talks about how that's why getting angry sometimes feels good, because it's a positive and a negative emotion. And that's why action is associated with fire, which is associated with Mars, because sometimes when you get angry, it pulls you or pushes you, whichever one you want to use, to take action and do something. You're getting fucked over so much, and a bully's picking on you over and over and over again. My dad had a story like this. He got picked on, and he was a little guy for a while until he hit his growth spurt, and then this guy would literally dunk him in the toilet and shit like that. And then one day when he went to do it, my dad had enough, and he fucking swung one-hit wonder, knocked the guy on his ass. Oh, fuck, you fucking nuts, LeBlanc. Even though he picked on him all these other days, never fucked with him once again. That action was provoked by Marsarian anger of, I'm going to get fucking dunked in the toilet again. I can't keep putting up with this. I got to do something. His mom kept telling him, my grandma kept telling him over and over again to stick up for himself, or else it's going to keep happening. And he just wouldn't. And one day he did. And, I'm not going to justify war or anything like that, but sometimes you need to do things like this, especially, I think both men and women. Girls are picking on other girls. Well, anyways, doesn't matter. But that was like the first part of this. And then he ends up getting into the biblical hyperlinks, which is kind of a cool thing. And that's why this book is useful. Any divinely inspired book is useful. Now, what the church and priests and people and schools and establishments and Roman Catholic, school boards and all that, what they do with that and teach and preach is not so cool, right? I get that, and I'm not gonna fucking pretend like that's not something that hasn't happened. And he even says that in this. I'm not trying to defend him or not defend him. I'm trying to state that you can learn witchcraft, spirituality, new age, fucking whatever, from listening to Jordan Peterson, because he's spent a lifetime of studying philosophers, psychologists, and history, and a vast majority of his life looking at the darkest things that happen to humanity and how we can fix that. I don't think I have it anymore, and I might record it and put it on here, but this is already pretty long. But in his newest one, he says, and it was one of the most powerful things I ever heard, and it's almost like a reason for what I do and most people who come on YouTube and talk about things, whether they're talking about conspiracies, truth, spirituality, whatever. We throw around all these fucking conspiracy theories and all these doom and gloom fucking theories, or whatever the case is. And that's great and fine. We know the problems. Everybody knows the fucking problems that we have. And right now we have this big COVID fucking problem. But isn't it time to start throwing out some fucking solutions out here? Because like he says, and this is one of the parts about the Bible thing I like, nothing is real until it's named. So Adam and God are walking around. God makes an animal. Adam calls it a fucking dog. He makes an animal, calls it a fucking bird, calls it a fucking cow. This is water and the seas. Well, maybe not water and the seas, but you know what I mean? It's not real until you call it. So the problems are real when we say them out loud. And we can start throwing out solutions, and they can also become real and work. And that's what I try to do. I try to do that continuously. And this is where he gets into the point where postmodernists thinking that, you know, well, this book is so complex, you can't fucking make sense out of it. And he says, well, life is so complex, you can't make sense out of it. And he says that's the wrong attitude to have, because when you get there, if you get into this state where everything is just so chaotic that you can't make sense of the world, well, then your body goes into a default mode of fucking, you know, preparation and, you know, anxiety. And that's the fight or flight fucking thing I've been talking about because of this COVID thing that people are going into left, right, and center. So they're wearing a mask, they're not taking in germs for their bodies to fight against, to get stronger. I mean, we can't get rid of this virus. Anybody who thinks this virus is going to go away is mistaken, and stupidly mistaken. We don't get rid of viruses. We've cured diseases, but we don't get rid of viruses. They're here to fucking stay. And like I said, 20 years plus, we've been vaccinating our fucking cattle, horses, every fucking animal on a farm here in Canada anyways. And I've seen it in Australian people too. Like, I've looked this up pretty thoroughly, and it's there for you to see if you want. But anyways, they've had cures for that. Is there going to be a cure for us? Who knows? We have a flu shot. Why? Because you get the flu. We can't get rid of the flu, but we have a flu shot so your body can get stronger against it. But now all of a sudden we have this virus and we're just going to hide from it? That doesn't make any sense. And what's going to happen is we're going to make ourselves weaker. As time goes on, we're in these fucking masks to the point where this virus can take us out. It's the wrong solution. It's not the right solution one fucking bit. It's going to make everybody have autoimmune disease where your immune system has to work in overdrive and protect you when you don't even need protecting, and just starts, I mean, I don't like saying that, but it's the wrong solution. And this is the segue where I'm going to get a little darker on this, because, you know, he talks about the deities, and we talked about, you know, finding your purpose and your passion and doing things like this. It's just like when I started my spirituality, before I found Jordan Peterson, these are the steps I was taking before I found the magical curriculum and doing these things. And there's a lot of people out here trying to do that. And then they realize, okay, well, Dark Night of the Soul is going to come. How do I do that? How do I bring on these things? And that's what happens. It's inevitable. You are going to hit a Dark Night of the Soul. You're going to be tested. If your goal is to become spiritual and do these spiritual practices, whatever the case is, well, you can learn from somebody like Jordan Peterson. And it helps you to understand these psychological fucking aspects and these philosophy fucking ideas. But more than that, he teaches you a wide variety of things. And right now we're getting into the darker part of this, where, you know, he's going to get in. I think the next part I have on here is about Mephistopheles, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the Faustian pack. That's where that comes from. And I don't know if you don't know what that is, well, you'll know it by selling your soul to the devil. This is where this comes from. Which, that play, I highly recommend reading it, or finding it, or watching it if you can find the movie, or whatever the case is, if there is a movie. But because there's way more valid information in there than just selling your soul to the devil. Because at the end, he ends up finding something very profound to do with his time, and it's helping others. And anyways, but you know, it ends up going to the point where it's like, well, there's so much bullshit in this world. What's the fucking point of even fucking living and doing it? And then I'm going to play a clip from his newest fucking thing, where he's so emotional on stage. He's talking about when his wife's mother passed away and his wife's father. And this is what you have to prepare for. Because you can walk around like we're in fucking love and light and all that, like nothing bad's gonna happen to you, or by the time something bad happens to you, you're gonna be figuring out how to do magic to save people. But the truth of it is, or even if you can save people, you're not gonna be able to save everybody, and you definitely won't be able to save yourself. We are all inevitably doomed. And when you can make peace with that, and you can figure out how to help people through hard times, then you can make the world a better fucking place. If you can try to find the information to help people get through this COVID shit and enlighten them on ways to keep their family safe. Whether you're trying to get a big message out to everybody, you know, people go around saying it's fake, it's fake, it's fake. Okay, maybe they're providing a service, but mostly you're just gonna make people think you're an idiot or uneducated. But you're better off to go around saying, okay, well, maybe there is a disease, maybe there is a virus out there that is COVID, and, you know, you have a weak immune system, it could kill you. But, you know, this mask wearing is a terrible long-term solution to this problem. It hasn't worked yet, and it won't work. And unless you're going to do breathing techniques when you get home after wearing the mask, and allow your kids to go out and eat dirt and still get in these germs that we got all our life as adults and our parents got all their life as adults, well, if they're not going to take those in, then their organs are not going to grow the correct way. I mean, it's the reason you go to Cuba, you need to take a shot, because if you drink their water, you're going to get sick because you haven't been exposed to those germs. So you take a shot so that you're immune to that, so that you can have those germs put in you, and whatever the case is. Well, why aren't we taking in this virus a little bit by a little bit? Why are we hiding from it? And it's because people with weak immune systems probably die from it. But there's this other element to it that no one talks about, and I don't know if it was Black Lives Matter or it was one of these other things, big things that happened during COVID. And it was right around the same time that there was a bunch of court cases going on in the United States mostly, but some other places where doctors, hospitals, and even nurses and other things were getting fucking fined and brought to court up on charges for saying every death that happened was COVID related. And you know, their point was, well, most of the people did have the common cold in them, which is a type of COVID, and that was their fucking defense. But none of this was brought to light because they all settled out of court, billions and billions of dollars to settle out of court to make this go away. You can find this information, it's out there. I have it. I don't play it because it's highly controversial, and every time I play something like this, my video gets shut down, blocked, banned, you know, put on a private setting, and then I can't even access it anymore. So if I put this out there, it's just going to go away. And I don't want to give them any reasons to try to fucking shut me down. But if you go out there and you look at it, you will fucking find this information, and you'll see there's more going on to this. And that I'm not saying that makes this fake, that makes this less real, or any of that. I think that's what they want you to believe. Once again, anytime someone just shuts something down without any controversy or any light shown on it, means that they really don't want that in the public eye. When someone makes a big deal out of somebody getting banned, it's because they want you to see that and want you to focus on the conspiracies and the inequality and all this other crap. If you're focused on that, then you can't find the real fucking truth. But we're getting into a darker part of all this. But it doesn't change the fact that you can learn witchcraft spirituality. And maybe it takes a certain mindset, and maybe it's because my mind is like this. Maybe I'm fucking biased towards him. But I've gotten rid of my Christian programming to the point where, you know, I don't even like, you know, having fucking a cross up in my house. But more and more I'm coming to the realization that instead of fucking taking on what the church propagated and whatever else, taking the body of work and thinking of it as, okay, well, someone was divinely inspired to write this. And even the translators may have been divinely inspired to translate it in certain ways. Who fucking knows? The point is, I can see these stories in our movies. I see these stories everywhere, and it's not by accident. But if you are continuously watching fear-based shit and thinking you're under attack and whatever the case is, it's not good for you. And we need to start finding solutions to our problems instead of just trying to find a happy life and trying to find your fucking purpose and passion. It's like, well, there's problems to fucking fix. Start fixing your own family and your own fucking problems, and then you'll be allowed to get to your passion and purpose. Otherwise, if you're just trying to find your passion and purpose with all these problems, and you're not helping or trying to help, whatever the case is, then why would you get to deserve to find that? Anyways, let's move on to the next one.
Mephistopheles, and Mephistopheles is the devil. And he actually has the devil explain himself twice, basically using the same words, which I really like. It was very profound. And basically, Goethe's Mephistopheles says, you know, he's the adversary of the word. That's a good way of putting it, because that's how it works out mythologically. He's the figure behind the snake in the Garden of Eden, which is something we'll talk about more. But he has a sophisticated philosophy. He's not just some random troublemaker. He's got a deep philosophy, and his philosophy is quite straightforward. And it's compelling. It's compelling. And people are gripped by it quite often, far more often than they think. And his philosophy is, well, look around at the world. It's like Ivan Karamazov in the Brothers Karamazov, when he's trying to disabuse his younger brother of being a Christian monk. Mephistopheles says, well, look at the world. I mean, you look around the world, it's nothing but a bloodbath. It's just suffering everywhere. Everything eats everything, and people die terribly, and they're cruel to one another, and the whole mess is nothing but a constant haul of terrible carnage and ruin and wreck. He says it'd be better if it was never existed at all. And that's a very, very interesting idea. And I do believe, and I've seen this in people many times, that in the depths of despair, especially when you've been betrayed, for example, and you wander into the wrong subdivision of the underworld, that's something that comes to mind. If you have a very sick child, for example, or maybe your whole family is suffering, as whole families do sometimes, an idea is going to come to you. It's like, good God, who put this mess together? And is it really worth it? Is it really worth the suffering? Suicidal people, they say no. They say, no, enough of this. And you have to be pushed a long way, generally speaking, before you'll actually commit suicide. You have to be in very, very desperate straits. But your answer under those conditions is that being is such that it would be better if it had never been. And that's I think it's a terrible philosophy, I believe, because I think what happens if you act it out is that you make the very things that led you to despair far worse. And I can't see that if it's reasonable to draw a logical conclusion that suffering justifies your desire to make being end, that the answer to that can't be to produce more suffering. That just doesn't make sense. And my observation has been that people who act out the Mephistophelian philosophy inevitably make suffering far worse. And then that raises the other specter of, well, do they want being just to cease, or are they just out for bloody revenge at any cost? And my conclusion has always been is that the mask is, well, being shouldn't exist because it's too terrible, but the true motivation is I'm going to make everyone suffer as much as I possibly can before I say goodbye to this place. And if you read the writings of people like the kids who shot up the Columbine High School, they'll tell you exactly that that's precisely and exactly what they concluded and then acted out. So anyways, but in this, God says that it was good. And I've thought about that a lot. It's like, because the question is something like, well, is something better than nothing? Because that's a really good question, And I thought about two things in relationship to that. And one is, well, maybe it depends on how it is that you are, right? Because it could be that there are ways of being in the world that justify the world. And there are ways of being in the world that make the world unbearable. And I believe that the narrative that runs through the biblical stories is precisely a dialogue between those two types of being. And the optimistic part of the story is that being requires limitation and suffering. There's no escape from that. But there are modes of being that allow that to be perhaps even more than tolerable. Perhaps there are modes of being that allow that to be good. And it's a straight and narrow road. It's a very difficult road to tread. So I think, well, that's possible. I'm not an optimist by nature. But that's one of the things that I've conceptualized and read about that I actually find plausible, because it's certainly the case, everyone knows this, that there are ways that you can act that make things worse. Everyone knows that. And so if that's the case, there has to be the opposite, right? There has to be ways that you could act that make things better. And obviously you can act in ways that make things really way worse. And so the question is, well, are there ways that you can act that make things really much better? And I think that's the question is, can we have our cake and eat it too? Can we have the being that requires limitation and suffering, and also simultaneously transcend that by our mode of being? And I believe that the biblical stories, and perhaps not only the biblical stories, but the biblical stories are one of the human imagination's best attempts to address and answer that question. That's what the entire story is about. So the first of it is the catastrophe of the collapse of self-consciousness and the entrance of humanity into history. And the rest of it is, okay, now we're in history. Now we know that we're going to die. We know about our mortality. We're conscious of our own being. Is there a mode of acting in the world that allows that to be justifiable, or maybe even more, that allows that to be triumphant? And then I would also say, maybe it's worth finding out, That's the other thing that's so interesting, because you've got this short time on earth, and there's lots of things that are very, very difficult to contend with. And you have the problem of tolerating yourself even in all your insufficiency. And one of the things that seems to me to be the case is that if you adopt a sufficiently profound mode of being, if you attempt to do that, then the mere act of lifting up that weight is enough to justify the fact that you're insufficient and mortal and bound by tragedy. And I believe that, and I believe people believe that, because if you watch how people...
All right, so I was talking about getting a little dark, because we're talking about things that are going to cause you to, cause you to maybe get suicidal, depressed at the very, maybe anxious at the very best, depressed, next level down, and then after that it's fucking, and once you get suicidal, it's just like, that's all you get. All your thoughts are about killing yourselves and being out of this place. And as of right now, like, our death count in my town since COVID's hit, people are at home, people who didn't have that much money, just scraping by, when they get their check, they do it all their drugs and whatever else, and then barely enough to get their kids by, and then for the rest of the month they're kind of sober and they pretend like they're going to get help, and then they get their check and they're fucked up again. Well, then COVID hits and they get their fucking check, plus they're getting extra money, and now people are overdosing. Because at first it was all great, we got extra money, yeah, we can get extra high, we can do extra things, I get my kids extra stuff too in between, yeah, get another check, and now people are dying. Because you can't just dump money on poor people, and that's a whole other topic. I'm not just going to say that, I don't think our system is completely fair, but I agree with Jordan Peterson when he says that it's not a simple problem to just say, okay, all the poverty in the world, let's just give everybody the money they need for all the things they want and everything will go away. It's not the case. And if anything, COVID and all this, it's called CERB benefit here, and in Canada anyways, is proving that there's more people overdosing, more people getting in accidents, more people dying. There's actually been a murder in my little shit town, you know what I mean? It's fucked. People are at home gnawing away at themselves because they're fucking bored. They won't want to work, they don't want to work, and then when they're out of work, they get fucking bored, they don't know what to do with themselves. And I'm not saying working 9 to 5 is the solution. I'm saying finding your passion, like fucking Wizard says, is probably the solution. Before you can find your passion, you gotta fix your fucking problems. That's the problem. People don't want to do that. And when it gets into the mode of being, a mode of being that transcends all the pain, is there a way to live that makes, when suffering happens and it's inevitable to happen, is there a way to be that makes it less bad? And not only that, is there a way that, those things are going to be few and far between? And yeah, for me, that comes back to what you focus on expands. What you give energy to grows. So if you're only focusing on your problems, then that's all you're going to have. And the problem is that our divine creator, whoever the fuck it is, whatever you want to say, they love us so much, or they just want us to be happy in whatever situation we have, that we get an endorphin released whenever we either have too much negative emotion or too much positive emotion. And people can literally be addicted to their suicidal, depressive, anxious fucking thoughts. I know people that go around complaining and want people's pity. Now, they don't want people to pity them and give them those looks, but in the same sense, they like when they can say, well, my life's worse than your life. And they'll go around laughing like, well, that's nothing. Look what happened to me. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, holy fuck, do you not realize what you're doing? It's terrible. And that's why the next part I'm going to play is pretty powerful. He gets pretty emotional during it, but he explains through a situation that was pretty terrible that happened, what happened as a result of it. And you got to understand that it's like, okay, well, that's far from a perfect situation. Like, the mother died, and the kids lost a mother, he lost his mother-in-law, and the father lost his wife that he loves and still loves. But it's like, yeah, but that's going to happen. You got to get prepared for that, because that's going to happen. Knowing magic and all this shit's great, and you can get the things you want in life, and you can figure out your path faster. But by doing so, you're also going to get life lessons faster. And the little life lessons that I had, I never thought would happen to me. Like the thing with my wife that happened recently, I never thought that would happen to me. I never thought that would happen to me. But after I look back on it, the things I've done and whatever, it was inevitable for that to happen. I was just kidding my fucking self. And I was in a bad place when that happened. I never thought I would curse anybody. I never thought I'd send anybody a fucking evil thought form, and I did that shit. I used magic in an evil way, I guess, a baneful way, and I never thought I would fucking do something like that. More than that, I understand that what happened to me was a learning curve and it was a test and all that now, but in the moment, there were times where it was, if it wasn't for my daughter's and my stepson's face and my mother's face at my funeral, if it wasn't for that, you know, I don't know. If I was able to get so enraged that I wasn't able to see them so sad that I took my own life, maybe I would have. I was that upset over something as silly as my wife talking to another man because I wasn't helping her anymore and wasn't being around or whatever. And as much as maybe she shouldn't talk to another man, she should have tried harder with me, it doesn't make what I did any more right with her. You gotta grow from these experiences. I'm glad I have my wife. I'm glad I'm with her. I'm glad I'm with somebody who made me realize how great I had it. I was trying so hard to transform my life and transform myself and reach enlightenment and be this powerful magi that I put everybody else on the sidelines and just focused on me solely. And it put me in a dark place, and then I came out of this dark place, and now the trick is to do what I want to do, find out what I want to do for my life, make my life passionate, make my life wonderful and happy at the same time as raising my kids and making sure that they have the tools they need to survive in life, so that they don't grow up and they can't handle things in life, and then whenever something bad happens to them, that they get those feelings that I had. That's one of the most important things to me now. It's more important than my own self-transformations, to making sure that my kids, when they go through their first heartache or their first really bad breakup or their first whatever it is, that they don't get suicidal thoughts to the point where they want to take their own life. That's important. If you have kids and you're focusing on yourself and trying to find your passion, well, you better make sure that you have these fucking angles ironed out as well. Because if you make kids, then you have a responsibility to make sure those kids know what they need to know. I mean, you can't teach them what you don't know. So you have to learn more, and that's one of the things I do. I'm continuously learning more about spirituality, about life, about psychology, about whatever I can. And one of the reasons, and you know, whether it's an excuse to learn more or not, doesn't matter. I want all the tools to be able to teach them the proper things. As I evolve, they evolve. And that's one of those things that you do. If you can better your life, if you can better your life through magic, well, then you're going to better their life in the process. You're going to program them that they can do anything and reach anything, but it's not something you can just fucking make a sigil, put it away, and then boom, your life is perfect. It's never going to be like that. You can manifest things like that, but if you don't have the proper mindset, and that's one of the things he really promotes, that's like an underlying subliminal message, is gratitude. Throughout this whole thing, it's gratitude, being grateful for what you have, because you really don't know what you have until it's gone. You really don't. You really fucking don't. And that's what takes people out, because when they lose something and they never gave it attention before, thought it was a priority, when they lose it, it knocks them the fuck out. It takes them everything to bounce back, and some people just don't bounce back. And that's how you can make things better. You start fixing your fucking life at the same time as you learn these systems and whatever you're drawn to, and you make finding your purpose, but you don't just sit back and wish for your purpose to fall in your lap while you do nothing to help anybody else. These rich and greedy people everybody talks about, this 1% everybody talks about, do more for the economy, creating jobs, helping fucking poor people, building houses, giving to organizations than you can even imagine. Yet they are shit on left, right, and center. And what do? Do they come out and say, hey, all you fucking haters out there, suck a dick, you're fucking worthless pieces of shit that never given a dime? You're like, no, they just take it. They just fucking, they're just swine. They don't know what they're talking about, and they just move on with their life. And they keep getting better things in return. Alyssa Sharp, the Divine Venus, she talked about, because she does birth charts of pop stars, You know, pop stars have hard lives and they go through hard times. Sometimes they don't make it out. Sometimes their image is fucked after. Sometimes they make it out. Sometimes they don't care. Whatever the case is, but they have hard experiences. Rappers, a lot of guys like listening to rappers that came from drugs and went to jail and then now they're a star. People like the underdog. You watch a movie, the guy's a nerd like Spider-Man. He gets powers, beats up one bully, but uses his powers for good after that. People like that story. Why? Jesus was sacrificed on the cross, yet he was this perfect man. People love that fucking story because you got sacrificed for everybody. And, you know, it depends on how you look at that. And, you know, I kind of agree with the whole Odin said Jesus was a coward thing by Thunder Wizard. I kind of agree with that because, you know, God tells him he has to sacrifice and he doesn't want to do it. But in another sense, it's like, okay, well, if you trust in the divine, if you believe in the divine, when the divine tells you, Corey, this is going to be awkward, but go do the fucking dishes today. Clean up your fucking room. And you prove that to me, I'll give you something. It's like, no, what's that going to do? What's that going to do? How is me dying on a cross going to help anybody? Just fucking do it. And Jesus died, but then he came back to life and he got to sit in heaven. You know, and that's a metaphor, and that's not actually how it works, but how do we know is when we die, we just come back and we don't have any experiences of that. Yes, people that we leave behind are sad, but that's the point of what Peterson's teaching, is if we don't completely break down and lose ourselves when we have tragedy, then we can slowly start making tragedy less of a big deal, so that these depressions and these anxieties and all these things that come along with all these tragedies, you know, we can deal with them and be a healthier species all at once. We can have solutions to these problems. And we can have an upward spiral instead of this downward spiral. Being addicted to all these negative things that happen to everybody all the time is just not helping anybody. We can make our lives better. We can realize that when we die, we either come back anyways, or we go off to a fucking better place. I mean, everybody says this place is shitty anyways. I mean, it's full of beauty and great things. And if you can take control of your life and manifest whatever you want, whatever you get to that point, well, then that's pretty sick. It's like heaven on earth. Why would you want to die from that? But if you're not at that place, well, then it's pretty horrible. So leaving here is not that big of a deal either. People are sad because their loved ones are gone, but it's like, well, are they sad because they're gone, or are they jealous because they're not? Fuck it, they're still stuck here. And I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but the point I'm trying to get at is you know, it's we don't know what happens when we move on. We really don't. And we can be sad about the people we lose, or we can realize that it's a part of life and prepare ourselves mentally for that. And instead of putting it off, like you put off a fight, you put off this hard conversation with your partner, you put all these things off, but when they happen, they're brutal. If you don't put it off, you deal with it a little bit at a time, then it's not so brutal. I mean, you can even correlate that to COVID. It's like, well, if we give ourselves a little bit of COVID and we build up the antibodies, unless we know we have a weak immune system, then we can't do that, those people, until we either fix our immune system or realize that, no, we have to be in a bubble for the rest of our life. You know, we have to find the solutions. We can't just hide from things. And what are people walking around with a mask on? They're hiding from this virus that can't die. Look up the scientific info on this. They say COVID could be on the ground just chilling there forever. Snow can freeze over it, and then when the air thaws, COVID's back. We can't get rid of it. People can beat it. If everybody got infected with it, then everybody who's not strong enough would die, and the rest of us would beat it. And technically, then it could be gone, because then it's only the strong people left. And that's a mean thing to say, because it's like, well, how is that fair to the people that were born weaker? And fair enough. It's not fucking fair, but it's something we're dealing with. And how is making everybody weaker fair? None of these circumstances are easy. None of these solutions are easy, and that's why we shouldn't be doing one solution that just makes everybody weak and have the same problem and potentially kill off the species be our solution. That makes no sense. It's like telling everybody that if you lose a loved one, to go kill yourself. I mean, well, not that extreme, but you know what I'm saying. But anyways, there's so much to unpack from these Peterson things. It's why you can listen to them over and over again and get so much knowledge from them. And he's an outstanding man, and I'm so happy he's back. He got a standing ovation after his last one, and he well deserves it, because he's been through some pretty shitty shit. His wife was sick. he had an addiction to benzodiazepine, benzos, which is what, I took a half a Xan, 13 hours on land, Xanax. That's a benzodiazepine. I mean, if you watch the show Cops like 10 years ago, you'd hear, every third fucking thing they shown, it was someone driving all fucked up, and the cop be like, "Oh, what'd you take?" Like, "Oh, I took a Xan. I never knew what that was, but that's what it was. It's been popular, and it's even more popular now. So you got hooked on that, and you can judge them for that if you want, but dealing with your tragedy rather than just offing yourself and making other people deal with it, I think is a little bit better. It's not a great solution. It's definitely a terrible short-term solution, but it's one that we can deal with. It's the reason why the liquor stores and the beer stores don't close in their essential services, because people are highly addicted to that, coping with the tragedy of life. And if we close those down, well, things would get fucked up pretty fucking fast. Even the governments of the world understand that. Life isn't fucking easy, but there are ways you can do and deal with it and make it better. If everybody just died of old age, it'd be a perfect world, but that's not our perfect world. People are given tests, life tests, and they don't know their tests. They think God just has this random way with us. It's like, no. There are ways out of these things. There's things you have to learn by these things. And I'm not going to speak on any specifics because I don't know how it feels to have a sick child or whatever the case is, and I never will, because if my child was sick, I would do everything in my power, and maybe that wouldn't be enough, and maybe that would take me out. So I can't talk about something like that because, I don't know. I'm not in that situation, but those things obviously happen for some fucked up reason, and we can dwell on it and let it take us out and fuck up the rest of our lives and make our relationships fucked up with our family, or we can find a way to get past it and move on. And just as many people that have killed, I think there's more people that actually cope with it than there is that kill themselves over it. So there's hope here. Like he says, if we can do things that make the world worse, then we can definitely do things that make the world better. And the worse way is easier because it requires anger and laziness and no discipline and no knowledge. But the things that make us better are for the strong, or for the powerful, or for the ones that are built for this stuff. And we got to lead by example. And I say we because I believe I'm one of those people. Not completely, not yet, but I'm going to be one of those people. And I'm fucking unfortunately going to have tests that are going to come my way. And I'm going to have to fucking prove that. And it is what it is. You got to get on board with the fact that you're going to lose everybody that's in your life. And if you don't lose the people in your life, it's because you end up getting something that's going to take you out. And maybe it doesn't have to be that way, but we're not at the place in our evolution yet that has brought us to where we can just live forever and not have to reincarnate. And why should we be? When there's suffering in the world, when there's people in poverty, when there's addiction, when there's people killing other people, when there's fucking racism and all these other things, there's no reason for us to be able to live forever when we are not treating everybody with equal loving and respect. And that's the way it should be. We should realize that tragedy happens and it's no one's fucking fault. And maybe some people do cause the tragedy in their life. If what you focus on expands, then why the fuck are you focusing on things that are not going to do any fucking good for you? Why are you focusing on things that are going to make your life miserable? If you know this and you're doing it still, it's because you're weak, it's because you're undisciplined, and it's because you're fucking lazy. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, and I was there. And there's days where I'm still there. And there's certain things I do in my life that are very much still there. But I'm trying. I'm always trying to better myself. And everybody needs to always try to better themselves. And if you're just going to blame circumstance for everything bad that happened to you, well, I don't know your circumstances, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to help anybody. No, you, not anybody.
And to stand up straight, and face the darkness, like fully. What you discover at the darkest part is the brightest light. And that's something that's so much worth discovering, because there's going to be terrible darkness in your life. And it's going to make you cynical and bitter. And it could easily be that you're just not looking at it enough. Because if you looked at it enough and you didn't shy away and you brought everything you had to bear on it, you'd find that there was more to you than there was to the horror. You know, I watched my father-in-law. I'll end with this. And you know, you don't know, because you're not bringing your A game to the table with all that cynicism and bitterness and resentment and willful blindness and avoidance. Maybe you're playing at 60%. It's not good enough because there's too much of what's bad for 60% to be good enough. It's like you need 90% or 95% or 100%. When about 15, 20 years ago, my mother-in-law developed frontal temporal dementia, which I wouldn't recommend. You know, it's one of those degenerative neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, and those bloody things are, like they're in the top echelon of awful. You know, you watch a person deteriorate before your eyes. It's a lengthy, lengthy death. And it was slow. And her husband, he lived in this little town that I grew up in, about 3,000 people. And he was quite a character, man. Everybody knew him. I bought him a Foghorn Leghorn t-shirt once, because that's kind of what he was like. He was loud and sort of bombastic, but he stood up straight, I can tell you. And he played the fool a little bit, mostly for the amusement of people, but he was no damn fool. And I always admired him and liked him. And the feeling was mutual, thank God, since I married his daughter. And, you know, he drank a lot with his crazy friends up in northern Alberta, and he wasn't at home a lot because he was working a lot. And you know, he was kind of a party animal about town, but a good businessman and a good man. And then his wife got sick, and they moved to another town. And, you know, he took care of her for like 15 years. It was unbelievable as she deteriorated, you know, and she got more desperate to have him around, and her love for him never went away. Even as she lost herself almost completely, she would always light up when he came into the room, you know. And he took care of her right till within weeks of her death. He had to finally put her in an old folks' home because he was no longer strong enough to lift her up from the chair. And we interacted with him a lot, you know, because we were trying to help him figure out how to cope. And we had signs put up in the house, electronic signs that would tell her when he was leaving so that she would know where he went. And we had recordings in the bathroom so that she knew what to do when she went into the bathroom. And we tried to do everything we could to not make this absolutely bloody, atrocious experience complete hell. And he participated the whole way. You know, and it was really something to see. It was really... it left me with a tremendous sense of admiration for him, but not just for him, but for people who can do that. You know, and if there was a new decline, he took it on, and he didn't complain about it, and he tried to do what he could, you know, and like it was no picnic, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't hell. And then we were all gathered around the deathbed, my wife's mother's deathbed, and the family was there, and they got along pretty well, you know. Her sister's a palliative care nurse, and the other one's a pharmacist, and none of them are particularly afraid of illness and death. You know, they're a pretty tough group. And so, you know, they made sure their mother's lips were wet while she was no longer eating or drinking, and tried to make her comfortable. And they're around the deathbed, and they were kind of getting along, you know. It wasn't family feud at mother's death time, and that was kind of nice. And she died, and that was that. But it wasn't just that, because the fact that the family had coped with it well and nobly and honorably, I would say, brought them together. They were closer afterwards than they were before. And they all had more respect for their father. And then in the old folks' home, he met another woman who had a husband there who had Alzheimer's, and they got to know each other, you know, and he died after a while, and she died after a while, and then a few months later they started going out, and then eventually they had a relationship, and now they live together. And so he gained something. Like, it wasn't that he replaced what he lost, you know what I mean? Because he still has pictures of his wife up in his house, and she was the love of his life, and that's not going away. But, you know, His family respected him more, and everybody pulled together more. And it wasn't hell at the deathbed, it was just tragedy. And the family pulled together more. And that was a good example of how you can extract at least a certain amount of light out of what's dark, even at a personal level. And it's worth asking yourself. It's like, drop what you're doing that's foolish, that you know is foolish. And pick an aim that's worthwhile, to make things better for yourself, like you're worth taking care of, like you're worth something, and to surround yourself with people who believe the same and who are rejoicing in your accomplishments and unhappy when you fail, right? And you're comparing yourself to your accomplishments of yesterday and not to someone else's today, so that you're not jealous and bitter. And you put your own house in order so that you're not cursing the world when some of its disarray might be your fault. And you're trying to pursue something meaningful, and you're doing your best to tell the truth and all of that. And then you see what happens. Who the hell are you? You think you're a miracle of some bloody bizarre sort. We've been around for 3.5 billion years. Every single one of your relatives propagated successfully. And here you are, against all possible odds, in this world of hell in some sense, and bitterness and tyranny and malevolence. And yet, God only knows what's inside you, this capacity for consciousness, the capacity to confront potential and to turn it into something good. That's us, man. That's the Western story. That's the individual as the cornerstone of the state. That's our responsibility, and it really is who we are. And so we need to know that, and we need to remember it, and we need to act it out. And then maybe we can see what we can do about it, and see how good we could make things. And maybe that would be the purpose of your damn life, right? Not to be happy. It's like, there's problems to be solved. Be happy after you solve the goddamn things, right? So I learned, because I looked at dark things, that I learned that the light was more powerful than the darkness as far as I was concerned, and that people were capable, each of us, of remarkable things, and that we need to know that that's what we are. We're this consciousness that confronts potential with all its catastrophe. That's what we are. That's what makes us in the image of God. That's what gives us our intrinsic value. And that idea that we have intrinsic value, that's the bedrock presupposition of our state. We're going to question that, or we're going to live it out. Better to live it out. Find out who you are. Thank you very much.
That was one fucking fucking deserved fucking standing ovation. My man Peterson. Oh, I love him. I can't put it any other fucking way. He really is another version of somebody trying to make the world a better fucking place. And by doing it, he's a professor at Harvard. He teaches psychology. He's been doing this shit. He learned this shit, and now he's teaching what he knows. It's one of the reasons I watch him, because like I said, if you want to be something, then see the people that are doing something similar to what you want to do, and you fucking consume them. Learn how they do it. Put it in your 10,000 hours. Practice. Do it. Watch it. Take it in. Stay on task. He preaches action in a different way that Thunder Wizard does, but he still preaches action. And him and Thunder Wizard probably wouldn't see eye to eye because of the whole Bible fucking thing, but they preach something similar. And it's taking action. Look, I'm wearing a red shirt. Mara's action. But seriously, there's something in this that people need to hear. Is the reason why there was 5,000 or 6,000 people there, 3,000 at his other events. People are buying tickets to see this guy like he's a fucking musician. You know what I mean? I think his biblical stories are like 6.3 million fucking views. People that don't like him go there, buy a ticket just so they can ask a question, and he just shuts them down, you know? I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes you need something to push up against to learn it. But he gets into the magic here a little bit too. Like, we're consciousness that takes potential and turns it into what we want if we do it correctly. Or we can take the potential of harm or success or failure or, you know, finding our passion out of that failure. Well, you know, or we can just take the failure and just say, fuck it, it's not worth it. And we have that choice. We can do that, and we can let tragedy stop us, or we can take the tragedy and say, you know, it's a part of life, and I'm just going to keep doing me anyways, because I know this tragedy is inevitable, but I'm not going to let me take me out. And you got to realize that everybody has tragedy. These fucking successful people have had tragedy. These stars have had tragedy. You know, everybody's had tragedy. And depending on what they've been through, you know, if someone, God forbid, has lost a child in their life, well, then losing a job is probably not as bad. But if you've never lost a job and you've been working so hard and you had this plan, well, then losing a job is going to seem pretty hard. If you define yourself by this job, it's going to be hard. That hits men pretty hard. And probably women too, but I'm just saying, I know a lot of men that get taken out if they worked at a place like 25, 30 years, 5 years maybe away from their fucking retirement plan, and then they get taken out and they gotta restart somewhere. They're done. It's hard for them because they define themselves by that. But you can look at that as, all right, well, maybe I didn't like this job that much, but, you know, I was looking forward to just finishing out the next 5 years, or maybe this happened for a fucking reason, and maybe I need to find that fucking reason, because maybe I didn't want to waste the next 5 years there. Maybe that next 5 years, something bad would have happened, and now I have the chance to get rid of some of this built up resentment, emotional bullshit in my body, get it out so it doesn't develop a disease in the next 5 years, and I can be healthy for my actual retirement. You know, who knows why things happen, but we don't get to see the big picture. We get to see the small picture. And now with the internet and all the old traditions and the subconscious and the unconscious and all we know, we can put suggestions into our subconscious and make things play out in our life. And if you want that to happen, all you have to do is consume people that teach you how to do that, and then take the action to do it, and it will happen. It's so fucking simple that people won't even fucking do it. And I'm telling you, you probably watching me right now won't even do it. And I'm doing that so that you do it, by the way. Reverse psychology, and telling the kid not to do something is the best way to get them to do something. So I'm trying to motivate you that way. I'm not trying to be insulting. I want you to prove me wrong. But that fucking guy, fuck him, I'm going to do it. Best thing you can do, you know. And if you don't listen to me, well, then you're just proving me right. But, you know, and it took me a fucking while to start doing these things. My wife's even coming around and starting to do these things, you know. It's amazing. But it's not going to stop us from eventually parting from one another. It's not going to stop us from having to deal with, you know, people we love passing on, or having hard times in our life that we have to strive through. You know, maybe we put off our debt too long, and then it comes to bite us in the ass. You know, and that's why we're both actively working on our budget together and seeing where we can stop spending so much and put that money away for later on, for when issues happen, because they're inevitable. And if you plan for them, they're less likely to happen. If you pretend they won't happen, and I know I preach that sometimes, I say, well, if you don't give something attention, then it's less likely to happen, which is true. But there's also another law that, you know, if you don't, like I said with the fucking TV, we never bought insurance. We always bought insurance for our TV, never had to use it. So then we're like, fuck it, we never had to use insurance, why would we buy it now? And then right before we have to start paying Leon's for our TV, because it was like, wait 18 months to pay. Yeah, now we're paying for a TV we don't even fucking have. So there's, you know, it's one of those things. You gotta find that fine line, that middle ground. But anyways, this is a pretty long video, but I mean, what he just said speaks for itself. You know, that's a hard thing to go through. It's a terrible thing to go through. And you can go through it, make it fucking worse. Or you can make it not so fucking bad. And if you make it not so fucking bad, then good things will come out of it. But if you make it terrible, then worse things come out of it. And that's not, shouldn't even be optional. It should be something that it's the furthest thing from your fucking mind. You know, you shouldn't be like, oh, fuck this bitch. She's gonna get more money when mom passes on. I'm gonna fucking tell her where to go. Or, oh, she wants to control the fucking, you know, the fucking things that happen at the funeral. Fuck this bitch. No, it's like, how is that gonna help? Is that what your mother would have wanted? You know, like, anyways, let's get into some of the magic stuff, shall we? And I think the next one I play is probably gonna be the last one. And the podcast will be longer because I got 3 hours, but, you know, attention spans of people aren't that long. But one of these days, when certain people find my stuff that need it, and they like watching long things like documentary style or whatever, that's when my channel will take off. But until then, it's just a way for me to fucking get smarter and work shit out. But practice, baby. Gotta put in 10,000 hours to become fucking, you know, an expert at your fucking craft. So by making big videos, well, it's more hours for me, baby.
With this, it's associated, that's the idea there, is that there's something about the logos that is necessary for the absolute chaos of the reality beyond experience to manifest itself as reality. It's an amazing idea because it gives consciousness a constitutive role in the cosmos. And you can debate that, but you know, it's not, you can't just bloody well brush it off. Because first of all, we are the most complicated things there are that we know of by a massive amount. We're so complicated that it's unbelievable. And so, you know, there's a lot of cosmos out there, but there's a lot of cosmos in here too. And which one is greater is by no means obvious unless you use something trivial like relative size, which, you know, really isn't a very sophisticated approach. And whatever it is that is you has this capacity to experience reality and to transform it, which is a very strange thing, you know. You can conceptualize a future in your imagination, and then you can work and make that manifest. You participate in the process of creation. That's one way of thinking about it. And so that's why I think in Genesis 1, it relates the idea that human beings are made in the image of the divine, men and women, which is interesting too, because, you know, the feminists are always criticizing Christianity, for example, as being, inexorably patriarchal. Of course, they criticize everything like that, so it's hardly a stroke of bloody brilliance. But I think it's an absolute miracle that right at the beginning of the document, it says straightforwardly, like with no hesitation whatsoever, that the divine spark, which we're associating with the word that brings forth being, is manifest in men and women equally. That's a very cool thing. And you got to think, well, like I said, do you actually take that seriously? Well, what you got to ask is, what happens if you don't take it seriously? Right? Read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. That's the best investigation of that tactic that's ever been produced. Because what happens in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment is that the main character, whose name is Raskolnikov, decides that there's no intrinsic value to other people. And that as a consequence, he can do whatever he wants. It's only cowardice that stops him from acting, right? Because why would it be anything else if the value of other people is just an arbitrary superstition? Then why can't I do exactly what I want when I want? Which is the psychopath's viewpoint. Well, so Raskolnikov does. He kills someone who's a very horrible person, and he has very good reasons for killing her. And he's half-starved and a little bit insane and possessed by this ideology. It's brilliant, brilliant layout. And he finds out something after he kills her, which is that the post-killing Raskolnikov and the pre-killing Raskolnikov are not the same person even a little bit. Because he's broken a rule, like he's broken a serious rule, and there's no going back. And Crime and Punishment is the best investigation I know of what happens if you take the notion that there's nothing divine about the individual seriously. Now, you know, most of the people I know who are deeply atheistic, and I understand why they're deeply atheistic, they haven't contended with people like Dostoevsky, not as far as I can tell. Because I don't see logical flaws in Crime and Punishment. I think he got the psychology exactly right. And Dostoevsky's amazing for this, because in one of his books, The Devils, for example, he describes a political scenario that's not much different than the one we find ourselves in now. And there are these people who are possessed by rationalistic, utopian, atheistic ideas. And they're very powerful. They give rise to the communist revolution, right? I mean, they're powerful ideas. And his character, Stavrogan, also acts out the presupposition that human beings have no intrinsic nature and no intrinsic value. And it's another brilliant investigation, and Dostoevsky prophesies, that's what I would say, what will happen to a society if it goes down that road? And he was dead exactly accurate. It's uncanny to read Dostoevsky's The Possessed, or The Devils, depending on the translation, and then to read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, because one is fiction and prophecy, and the second is, hey, look, it turned out exactly the way that Dostoevsky said it would for exactly the same reasons. So it's quite remarkable. So the question is, do you contend seriously with the idea that A, there's something cosmically constitutive about consciousness, and B, that might well be considered divine, and C, that is instantiated in every person? And then ask yourself, if you're not a criminal, if you don't act it out. And then ask yourself what that means. Is that reflective of a reality? You know, is it a metaphor? Like maybe it's a metaphor, a complex metaphor that we have to use to organize our societies. Could well be, but even as a metaphor, it's true enough so that we mess with it at our peril. And it also took people a very long time to figure out. This is Genesis 1. You know what, I'm probably going to stop there because I believe it's 9:30. And so we didn't even get to the first line. Yeah. Look, I want to read you a couple of things that we'll use as a prodroma for the next lecture, because I'll just bounce through a collection of ideas that's associated with the notion of divinity, okay? And then we'll turn back to the first lines when we start the next lecture. I have no idea how far I'm going to get through the biblical stories, by the way, because I'm trying to figure this out as I go along. Okay, so, you know, there's an idea in Christianity that the image of God is a trinity, right? There's the Father, there's the element of the Father, there's the element of the Son, and there's the element of the Holy Spirit. And it's something like tradition, the spirit of tradition. It's something like the human being as the newest incarnation of that tradition, like the living incarnation of that tradition. And then it's something like the spirit in people that makes relationship with this and this possible, the spirit in individuals. And so I'm going to bounce my way quickly through some of the classical metaphorical attributes of God, so that we kind of have a cloud of notions about what we're talking about when we return to Genesis 1 and talk about the God who spoke chaos into being. So there's a fatherly aspect. So here's what God as a father is like. You can enter into a covenant with it, so you can make a bargain with it. Now you think about that, money is like that, because money is a bargain you make with the future, right? And so we've structured our world so that you can negotiate with the future. And I don't think that we would have got to the point where we could do that without having this idea to begin with. You can act as if the future is a reality. There's a spirit of tradition that enables you to act as if the future is something that can be bargained with. That's why you make sacrifices, right? And the sacrifices were acted out for a very long period of time, and now they're psychological. We know that you can sacrifice something valuable in the present and expect that you're negotiating with something that represents the transcendent future. And that's an amazing human discovery. Like no other